Up to class number 7. Who'd have thunk, right? Picking up kind of where we left off. Step 2, the second part of this. There'll be 2 more, and I'll explain more of that at the end. Memory and how the brain works. Remember I said this will be fun? I actually think it kind of is, because I have some questions, some things that'll happen that your brain will be on autopilot, or you may not see something that's there, because our brains aren't perfect. So let's just jump into this. I don't actually have any tech time. What I will say though is with these videos, almost always there's something that comes up in every class that's unique to that class. So there may be the need for just a quick, here's what's going on, or we have to change something, not dramatically, but to let you guys know. If it's short, I'll post it in the announcements in Blackboard. But if a video, a stepping through of how to do something will help, I may post that as well. And it wouldn't be an online class per se, but just kind of an update. So nothing yet, but it is a possibility. So anyhow, quick review. Talked about some of these things in video 6. Sympathy versus empathy. I feel bad for you, bless his heart, versus I actually put myself in your shoes to understand what's going on. And I use the example of the girl late to class. Okay. Note taking. A lot of information in the textbook. Remember the thing about technique versus procedure. Easy for me to say. Note taking is one of those that's really down to technique, and the textbook gives you some of those techniques. If you have a system that works, use it. Keep using it. Remember those strengths and weaknesses. If your note taking is not very good, well then come up with a new way. Use some of the ideas out of the textbook. Maybe use my idea, what I talked about, where I write notes in the margin when I actually have physical books, and see what works for you. And if it's working okay, maybe it needs tweaking, try something else. And you'll eventually find your sweet spot. Just like test taking, we talked about the same thing. We talked about the idea of being a professional, that doing your best, always trying to improve. And we looked at, a hockey player and a drummer. But I said, and I believe it with all my heart, that everybody, I don't care what you do, you can do it professionally. Okay? And toward the end, we looked at circle of concern, circle of worry, versus circle of influence, the circle of what we can do things about, and how to keep those kind of in a good relationship with each other. Don't worry about everything and feel like you can control nothing. Try to expand your circle of influence, shrink your circle of concern. Don't worry about stuff you can't do anything about. And then kind of ended up with the motivation idea. Intrinsic or internal, good job, versus extrinsic, maybe pay or fear of punishment. The other thing I would mention, and just another leadership tidbit, saying good job all the time makes it worthless. If you say good job infrequently because it was truly above and beyond and you mean it, then it means something. That proverbial pat on the back. You've probably had, well, everything was good job, great job, I can't believe it. And oftentimes all they're saying is great job, you did your basic job. That deserves kind of nothing. That's what you're getting paid to do. Right? And the discussion board, I was thinking about the showing up participation trophy idea. We may come back to that at some point, but I thought since we're going to finish this step with discussion on leadership, I'm going to put in there 3 leadership traits that you believe are critical and why, and I'll do one as kind of a primer as to why I think they are. Now don't copy mine. If you think the same thing, that's fine, but explain it in your own words. But there's all kinds of leadership traits that are critical. And I think number 1 is honesty, but we'll get more into that. So that's the discussion board, and it'll be explained in the folder for step 2. Okay, so only one word of the day today. Yeehaw. Paradigm. It looks like paradigm, right? It's called paradigm. And I mentioned it briefly last video. It's the way we see the world. It's kind of the glasses we view the world through. It's a pattern. It's a model. And, what does that mean? Hopefully, I've got an example using race cars, because I like to race, that kind of shows a changing and evolving paradigm. Right? And there's the definition, and given credit where I got it, the American Heritage Dictionary I thought had a really good one. The assumptions, concepts, values, and practices that constitute a way of viewing reality, your way of viewing reality. And look, if you have some empathy, you put yourself in other people's shoes, you might understand a little bit more about their paradigm and how they see the world. That's what a good leader does. So here we go. We're going to do a little time travel. We're going to go back to 1963, the year before I was born. The Indy 500. That's A.J. Foyt, and that's the kind of classic late 50s, early 60s Indy 500 race car. Now look at that thing. It's big, it's kind of brutish. The tires are tall but skinny, and the engine's in front of them. That's a roadster, and that fuel tank on the side. That was the norm. That's what he won the race in 1963. But there was a new paradigm starting to develop. And I use this because I race a Lotus, and that's what this is, a Lotus made in England. Notice the difference. Tires still a little bit tall and skinny, but not quite as tall. Much flatter, lower, more aerodynamic. And look where the engine is. So that gives the car much better weight balance front to back, which is what you want in a race car. So let's go back. Big and brutish. Think how heavy this thing would be in the front with that big monster V8 up front. So not as balanced, not as good at handling. Better, faster. And what's the goal of racing? It's to win the race. So how do I get to the finish line first? Stupid question, right? You go faster. That's true, but there's more to it than that. You have to be reliable, and there's one other piece that often doesn't get thought about. And I'll show you, there's a couple videos on that I think I hope you enjoy. Now, even with this, even with Lotus evolving to the low-slung, rear-engined race car, which Jim Clark did win the Indy 500 with, there's something else looming, improving. How can I go faster? And in this first picture, the light blue car, it's subtle. They're just starting to develop. But in Mark Donohue's 1972 winning race car, right, it starts in 69 and starts to evolve. You can see it much clearer. Look at these wings. They're upside down airplane wings in effect. And what they do, instead of a plane where it lifts it off the ground, they're flipped over and they push the car down into the pavement, which gives it more grip. And if I have more grip, I can go through the corners faster. Now, they also add drag, and they sacrifice a little bit of straight line speed, but they get more than made up for by going through the corners faster. So I can get to the finish line first. And also notice the tires, especially on Mark Donohue. That's a very young Roger Penske, if you're into racing at all. Wider, not as tall, much more what they call contact patch, much more tire in contact with the racing surface. And now add on top of that the wings pushing the car into the track. Much better grip. Cars today, Indy cars, Formula One cars, they generate so much downforce that they could run upside down on the ceiling if they're going over like 100 miles an hour. That's how much it pushes the car into the ground. Okay? And so let's do that. Let's take one more step down the race car timeline into a much more recent car. And look at that beauty. And it's not just to look cool. Everything on that car is moving air where it needs to go. And it makes it faster. Again, it adds drag, but I get more speed through the corners, which more than makes up for that top speed that I don't use that often. So the changes are not just to look cool. The videos. Sports car, this first one, sports car versus Formula One. It's a side-by-side comparison of race cars as you would think of them, kind of like mine, versus a Formula One car. And it's going through a corner in Belgium called Eau Rouge. And it is stunning. On the left side, your regular old race cars, going pretty fast. On the right side is a Formula One car with all the aero, and watch how fast it goes through that corner. It's shocking. It's almost scary. Okay. The next two, Fernando Alonso. This was an accident at the Melbourne, the Australian Grand Prix. Watch how fast things can go wrong and how safe the car is. So that's another reason why the change is, yes, to go faster, but if the driver gets killed because of an accident, that's no good. So the cars have gotten faster and they've gotten much safer. Watch that accident, and he crawls out of this rumpled mess that doesn't even look like a car. It's sitting up at the top against the tire wall. You almost have to watch it a second time to see the car. But he's fine. He walks away, waves to the crowd. He says, "Hey, Mom." The next one, another safety demo talking about not just going faster. This came from the Indy 500 a few years ago, and the guy Scott Dixon, 6-time IndyCar champion, so he is one of the best drivers on the planet. But even with him, things can go wrong, and they do. And again, he walks away from this accident. And if you watch closely, you'll see a car actually go underneath him while he's flying through the air. And then the last one other piece. If being fastest gets me to the finish line first, well, that's great, but almost all forms of racing have a pit stop, or 2 or 3 or 8. If my pit stops are slow, even by a second or two compared to other cars, I'm going to lose the race because I'm trying to make up tenths, hundreds of seconds on the racetrack. And if my pit crew blows it, that's all that time spent catching the car in front of me is now gone, wasted. So this is a comparison, a 50s era IndyCar pit stop that's over a minute. And then do watch it to the end. It's a Formula One pit stop by Ferrari. And look at the differences. There's much more in the way of crew, pneumatics, right? Air guns, things that make it go quicker. But it is stunning how quickly they change 4 tires on that Ferrari. It's almost like it doesn't even really stop. It's so fast. So I hope you like those. And the whole point of that is paradigm changes. To go faster, to get safer. Right? It's not just about blinding top speed. There's a lot to it. Okay, a little into the e-text, right? The textbook itself. I want to cover a couple things here, specifically section 2.6 in the text. This idea of selectivity. I've mentioned it before, but I think it's a very important point. That's why I'm foot stomping it. Sounds like it could be a good quiz question. Do not try to memorize everything. I've said that before. It's a mistake of newer students, and your head will explode. Look for those key concepts. We've been through this now. This is the 3rd time. Bolded words, if you see graphics, charts, an intro and summary, nice typo, intro and summary, and a glossary if they've got it. So look at, remember the spider chart. That's exactly what was in the spider chart. So be selective on what you're looking at, what you're trying to commit to memory. And there's some things that can help. Memory aids. Repetition helps you remember things. So does putting some music to it. And the ABCs, I guarantee if I ask somebody to tell me their ABCs, they'd probably sing that bloody song you learned when you were a little kid. If I asked you an address you had when you were a kid, you probably still have it because you put it to memory. You repeated it over and over and over, right? Your parents said, you can't go out of the house till you know your address or your phone number. 38965 Gardenside Drive. I hadn't lived there since 1979. It's where I grew up as a kid, but I still remember it, right? It's funny how repeating things. The Scout Oath. I was a Boy Scout once upon a time. A Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Why do I remember it? Because I had to repeat it over and over and over again to commit it to memory. So repetition is one of those. That's why we study. That's why we review, and why we take notes. And one of the best ways with note-taking is to go through a section, take some notes, and then as you get ready to prep for the test, go back and look at those notes. Note takers generally do better. And it doesn't have to be, pages and pages. It could be, a couple pages per step, per chapter of the textbook. Yeah, and the idea of the notes, the techniques that are in the textbook. In the last video, we talked a little bit about that. Mind maps, graphics. If you're kind of a visual learner, it may help that you draw pictures. The spider chart was a mind map. In the middle is the thesis or the chapter title, and the 4 little legs of the spider were those key concepts, bolded words, charts, and graphs, right? It's a mind map. That helps me remember it. Acronyms and mnemonics. It sounds like a weird thing. Acronyms, right, taking the first letter of a term, and we talked about PEMDAS as far as solving equations. And you could put that into a mnemonic, which is kind of a sentence. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Okay? Holmes. Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. It's an acronym for the 5 Great Lakes. I'm trying to think of another one off the top of my head. We had one when you were going in, especially when the weather was bad, things you would do to set up to fly the instrument approach with the airplane into landing on the runway, even when you couldn't see it until the very last second. And it was an acronym called Tomato Man, because there was a lot to get set up, but it worked. And then back to that idea of rote memorization. That's repetition. And some of the things you've used in the past, I guarantee, was like flashcards in elementary school, learning mathematics, addition, subtraction, multiplication, etc. The flashcard idea. You kept going over it and over and over it. Yeah, those all help. One of the things I've never really done, and I learned about it kind of late in the game, and I wish I would have done more of it, is a thing called journaling. And it's kind of a diary and notes combined, kind of a description of the process along with notes. And that tends to work for some people. I really do wish I'd have taken more kind of that when you read it, it's more of a trip down memory lane as opposed to just the notes themselves. So think about that. And then a question for you. My head's not too bad. Ever heard an old song you hadn't heard in a long time? Or better yet, you come in and you smell something cooking. Does that drive a memory? Does your brain go back? Do you think about somebody you knew when that song was really popular? In my example, man, even to this day, when I smell fresh cut grass, my brain goes back to those dreadful 2-a-day end of summer football practices. It just does, because it's embedded in my memory. And so that's what we're going to go to next. Start talking about how the brain works. Why does this happen? How do I remember my address from 40 years ago? Let's try an exercise first. You've got 3 candidates running for president. Right? Candidate A, associated with crooked politicians, astrologers, 2 mistresses, chain smoker, and drinks up to 10 martinis in a day. Yikes. His liver's probably not too good. Candidate B, sounds a little bit the same. Thrown out twice, sleeps till noon, used opium when he was in college, and drinks whiskey. Not just every evening, he drinks it all the time. And candidate C is a war hero, a vegetarian, doesn't smoke, has the occasional beer, and has had no extramarital affairs. Who are you going to vote for? 90% of the time people say C. Some folks go, he's trying to trick me, which I am. And they'll pick A or B. But who are these people? Well, let's look. A, I shrunk it just so you'll see his name, but that's what it was, right? The astrologer, chain smokes, 2 mistresses. That was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the only 4-term president who led us through the Great Depression and World War II. The second, Winston Churchill, a contemporary of FDR who was the Prime Minister of England and led them through World War II. And guess what? You're seeing a trend. So the third one was World War II as well. Any guesses? He seemed like the right choice. War hero. Doesn't smoke. Occasional beer. Yeah, that's Adolf Hitler. So the point here is you can subjectively pick and choose some traits, if you will, and drive an answer that isn't related to the facts beyond just that little snapshot. Hitler was a war hero. He fought in World War I. In fact, he suffered in a gas attack that left him in the hospital, made him very angry about the war and why his country lost. And that started his path toward National Socialism. He didn't have any extramarital affairs because he wasn't married until his last days when he decided to marry his girlfriend, if you will, Eva Braun. Okay? So, interesting. Dun, da, da, da. I've talked about it probably ad nauseum at this point. This is the brain chart. It's a little bit different than what you have in the textbook. But I like it. I've used it for years because I think it's useful. So 1, the Blue Star video is a video about this word priming, which we'll get to down here at the bottom. Procedural skills that are part of long-term memory, habits, emotions, and priming. We're going to spend a lot of time here. So let's work our way toward it. Watch the video. Sometimes you have to watch it twice to catch it. I've only had a few students catch it the first time. Very few. But that's okay. It's fun to watch. And this chart, just for your information, is both a PDF or a Word document, and it's in that supplemental materials folder, which is at the very bottom. If you go to lessons and scroll all the way to the bottom after all the chapters, that's where I put this. So if you want it, you can have it. You can have it, print a copy, or pull it up when you take the quiz. Okay? So let's start. Short-term memory lasts not very long. Our short-term memory, and it can only hold so many things. That's why you can't look at something one time and have it memorized, unless you have a photographic memory. Occasionally people do. So 7 components-ish. That's why, honestly, phone numbers are 7 digits, because if you sit and really put it to memory, you can remember that. Okay, hold that thought. If I'm calling to Georgia, I don't really think about the area code, right? If I'm calling down to the Catoosa County campus in Ringgold, I know the area code 706. I know the area code Chattanooga-wise 423. So I can just focus on those 7 digits, and I can remember those. But what it does, short-term memory, like you're reading a textbook, that's going into short-term memory. But to move it to where we can remember it, this is where the magic happens, long-term memory. You've got to do something in the interim. And that's why this scratch pad idea, working memory, comes in. Think of it like a yellow sticky note. So these few components I put on a yellow sticky note and I put them into my long-term memory. How? The key word in this is effort. What's effort? Effort is mnemonics or acronyms or rote memorization or repetition or journaling. All those things we just talked about put some effort into committing things to memory. That's how it works. And the more you do that, the more deeply into your memory it becomes. That's why I could remember my address from so many years ago. I could remember the Boy Scout motto, which I haven't thought about since I was probably 16 years old. It lasts a lifetime, asterisk. It does, in a sense. Memories do fade. And believe it or not, this is odd, but every time you recall a memory, it changes the memory. So think about a fun vacation maybe when you were a kid. Oftentimes, most of the time, we tend to remember the good parts, the fun, and we tend to forget about that long drive to Disney World and it was so hot, things like that. So that's where we're going to spend a few more minutes, more of our time, long-term memory, because it's the stuff that stays in here. And there are different types. And I don't really care about the names, declarative, non-declarative. That doesn't matter. It's the elements of. So if I said in class, can somebody give me the answer? 345 times 876. There are a few people out there that can do these equations in their head, bam, and give you the answer. Not me, but I could take out a pencil or a pen, write those down, and do the multiplication problem and get it. Because it's part of my long-term memory. I know how. I know the process to get the answer. And so that's what's under here. Facts and figures, events, timelines, being a history teacher, what happened, when it happened, what happened next. We can remember those things. That's part of long-term memory. Again, I don't really care about the name. But I want to even spend more time on this other piece, this kind of unconscious part of our memory. The idea of riding a bike. You may have not ridden a bike in years, but I bet if you had a bike sitting in front of you and I said ride it around the school, it may not be pretty, but I bet you could do it without crashing. And you probably spent a lot of time learning how to ride a bike and crashing, but now it's embedded. You don't really forget. That long-term memory also influences our reactions to things, and that's why emotion is in there. So, skills and habits. How many times have I said habits by now? Probably a dozen. Habits are part of long-term memory. That's why if you develop good habits, they just become second nature. You don't really think about them because they're up here and embedded in your brain. And that's partly why bad habits are so hard to break. And now add addiction like smoking, it makes it really hard to break. If skills-wise, when you started, let's say you played baseball, and when you first started, you were probably awful. I know I was, but as you practice more and more at hitting the ball, catching it, fielding grounders, whatever it is, you gain that skill, that muscle memory, and you can do it without even thinking. Working on my car. When you get a new car, there's always that learning curve on how to work on it, where things are, how do you change brakes, etc. The more you do it, the better you get. No kidding, right? Emotion. Emotional responses are part of our long-term memory because they have to do with our paradigm, our worldview. And so our emotional responses come from that. And I'm going to show you a few videos that kind of illustrate that. And a couple of them are kind of sad, right? And I don't do that for shock value, but they're very effective at generating an emotional response. And if I can get you emotional, if I can make you angry, or sad or whatever it is, whatever the emotion is, I can manipulate your thoughts easier. Why do you think political campaigns, sometimes they start out like, I'm Mike Breaking, I'm running for president, and here's what I want to do. This is my platform. But as you get closer to election, don't they always seem to break down into mudslinging that my opponent is just a bad person, and vice versa, they do it back at me? Because I want to generate that emotional response. It'll stick with you. That guy's a bad person. And then the last one's priming. And that's where the video comes in. And what priming is getting you to look one way when I'm doing something else. Think about a magician, right, that's doing some kind of trick. They generally do something over here, right? Watch this, while their other hand is over here doing something with the cards or the keys or the rope or whatever it is. They're getting you to focus by priming you, by saying, hey, look over here. That's what that video is all about. And it illustrates it better than me yapping about it. So no more yapping. Bad habits, right? Late with assignments. What's that word again? Not getting stuff done on time. Why is that happening? Remember, 95% of what affects your success or failure in school is under your control. Okay? Absenteeism is another one. People seem to get in the habit of doing that. Blaming others. External locus of control. It's not my fault. It's never my fault. Hey, I'm perfect, man. I never do anything wrong. Right, those race car videos. Best driver in the world was in a horrific crash. What's that word? Yeah, procrastination, putting things off. And that can drive all of these. Coming up with an excuse. Remember the little discussion we had about excuse versus reason. Let's go back to the girl that was 10 minutes late every class. Was that an excuse? I thought that she was just bad at time management. But actually it was a reason, because her time was such that she couldn't physically make it to class any sooner, and there was no other class available that she could take. So we worked out a solution. So that was actually a reason. And I've said this before, I'll say it again, the destructive nature of the term it's only a worksheet, it's only a quiz, it's only a semester. Eventually it's only my life, and I haven't gotten anywhere near where I want to go. What did Robin Williams say? What will your verse be? The powerful play goes on. Life goes on with or without you. Right? So don't get into that. It's only. Change your paradigm. That's what I'm getting at. One of the ones I see often from high school is maybe not yelled at, but you get, harped on. Where's that assignment? Maybe you do get yelled at. Hey, little Johnny, where's your assignment? Why are you always late? Rah, rah, rah. Teacher chewing you out. In college, that's not going to happen. So if you're expecting someone to be on your case to keep you in check, to remind you, that's not the paradigm in college. So just because you didn't get yelled at, didn't get chewed out, didn't get barked at, that does not mean it's okay. And that can apply to work situations. It can apply to relationships. You have to change your paradigm. You saw the cars. They evolved for speed and for safety. Everything evolves. Nothing is static. Okay? So just be prepared for that. And hopefully this class helps with that as well. Ooh, another busy slide. This is what I call an eye chart. So this is kind of a foul on my part, but oh well. Words that make us emotional. Again, this works far better in the class. And because we're adults in a college class, we can use words that will make people angry. Not to do it in the classroom, but to illustrate that. And think about words that go with race. Right? When I teach down in Dalton, most, if not all, the class is Hispanic. And we talk about some of the words, and I didn't even know this when I asked them, because there was a phrase when I was a kid that's much different than now. And I'm not going to use it on the video because I wouldn't call anybody that ever. But you know what I'm talking about, the dreaded N word, right? Words to make us emotional, angry, unreasoning. We flip out, right? All these Karen videos, people freaking out in public. There's a lot of them. Your sexual orientation. I mean, just think about it. Think about some of the words out there that can immediately set people off. Why are they used? To immediately set people off. Okay? What emotions are we talking about? Really all of them, but it seems to me anger is maybe one of the most powerful to make us lose control. Right? That we are not objective, but we are not slowly thinking about things. We're angry. The news does that, right? Fear, that's another one. The news, 5 things that'll kill you, puppies and unicorns. Okay, so combine emotion with a shifting paradigm. That's kind of my point here. The first video, this one, it hits hard at the end, but it's not the very end. So the idea is children see what adults do and they mimic that. So it's kind of a parental, just, watch what you do around kids because they're sponges. And almost at the end, there's a very powerful scene. And I've had people actually start crying in class with it. Again, I'm not doing it to make that happen because they have a memory associated with that. But at the very end, what happens, and I'm glad they did this, is they go back and show a positive image. Because to end on that second to last would be, it would leave you in that bad place. Right? It's short. I want to say it's from Australia, and it's a little bit dated, but man, is it good. The second, it's not as stunning, right? It's a hepatitis C commercial. You may have seen it. It's a couple years old at this point, and it looks like what's known as a public service announcement. That's what the first video was. It looks like it, but is it? So as you watch it, there's emotions at play, and it targets baby boomers. That's me. I'm the very tail end. Okay, boomer. I'm at the tail end of the baby boom, right? That would be something people would think I get mad about. I don't care. The answer is it's not a public service announcement. And if you watch it to the end, you'll see why. It's an advertisement. It's targeting boomers, older people who probably have good health insurance because the drug they're promoting is unbelievably expensive. Right? The last 2 are political ads. And we'll do more about, political ads. I don't want to bog down into the politics of the day, so I picked a little bit older ones. The first one's a Barack Obama political ad from when he was running for his first term. And watch it, and watch the emotion at play. The whole ad changes at about the midway point. So pay attention to the style, the music, the colors or lack thereof, and the message. And at the end, you see that you hear this, I'm Barack Obama and I approve this message. And you hear that a lot. I'm so-and-so and I approve this message. Why is that? Well, the reason is because that means the candidate has looked at and approved what's in that political ad. Now, the last one is from a political action committee, a PAC. So you don't hear, I approve this message. But the candidate can say, hey guys, take that down. It's too mudslingy. This was a very effective campaign ad against a guy named John Kerry when he was running against George W. Bush. And after watching it, tell me, if you were thinking about voting for John Kerry and you saw that ad, it might change your mind. Maybe not, but it might. It was pretty effective. And as you watch it, what adds credibility to those speaking against John Kerry? Again, we can't talk about it in the class. Watch it, see what you think, but it has to do with the titles under each of their names. That adds credibility to the speakers. So emotion, you're going to feel some emotional attachment, especially the first video, and that's why I put it up there. Okay, thinking fast and slow. In fact, if I was thinking ahead, there it is. I've got it on my bookshelf. I had to read it for my doctoral program. It's a book about how the brain works. Imagine that. That's what we're talking about, by a guy named Daniel Kahneman. And he is actually an economist, but he looked at people and how they kind of react to different situations. So he came up with this idea. He called it System 1, System 2. You don't really have to remember that, the numbers as such, but the idea of thinking fast and slow, that our brain is most often on autopilot and jumps to a conclusion or an answer that oftentimes is wrong. So that System 1, that autopilot, it actually does most of the work in the human brain because we are kind of lazy and we just let the brain kind of drift around. System 2 takes thought. You have to get out of autopilot and go into, this is a piece of critical thinking. It takes time and it takes effort. And I do a demo in the classroom, and about 50% of the time it works. I'll ask a student just to stand up and start walking around the classroom. And as they're walking, I'll ask them a question. Do you have a pet? Yes. What's its name? Fido. What did you have for lunch yesterday? Tuna fish sandwich. What's 487 times 642? Bam. they stop. You know why? Because up here they're trying to shift from autopilot, those first answers about their dog and their lunch, to something they have to put actual thought into. Try it sometime. If you're out on a walk with somebody, ask them a hard question. See if they don't stop or at least slow down. Because what they're doing is trying to focus everything here to answer that question. So they stop all the externals, the walking piece. It's kind of cool to watch. And I've got some more for you. Right, there's the volunteer. I mentioned this before as well. You ever been driving somewhere, halfway there you go, dang, I'm supposed to be going somewhere else. You were just in la la land, right? You're on autopilot. 99% of the time, driving a car doesn't take much focus. You just do it. You see the brake lights, you react. But that's why texting is so dangerous. That 1% of the time where you've got a split second to avoid an accident and you're staring at your phone, that split second's gone. Don't text and drive. Pull over if you have to. So, classic. This is the classic System 1 autopilot question. And I've had people get mad, and I've had to go on the board and show them here's why. But let's just step through it slowly. It's a simple question. A bat and a ball cost $1.10. Pretty cheap, right? Bat and a ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Okay, so that's all the information we need. A bat and a ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. Makes sense. How much does the ball cost? What's your brain saying to you? What's your System 1 autopilot brain telling you the answer is? I bet it's 10 cents. 99.9% of the time, that's the answer I get. 10 cents. I go around the whole class. By the end, usually somebody's like, he's screwing with me, and they'll figure it out. 10 cents is wrong. How can that be? This is where people start getting mad at me. 10 cents is wrong. If that was the case, if the ball cost 10 cents, then 10 cents plus $1, because the bat costs more than the ball, $1 more, $1 more than the ball, those two would add up to $1.20. Ball costs 10 cents, the bat's $1 more than the ball, so that's $1.10. Add them together, it's $1.20. That's wrong. That's not what it is. But your brain told you 10 cents, I guarantee it. So the answer is 5 cents. If you got it, good for you. If you didn't, you're not alone. But that demonstrates that mental autopilot. That to get this right, let's say your final grade depends on getting this right. Ooh, crunch. You're going to shift gears into System 2 because you don't want to get it wrong. And you'll spend time thinking about it. It's a simple question. What'd you have for lunch? Bam, autopilot. Bat the ball, autopilot. Wrong. And all right, can we control our emotions? I'll go through this quick. I'm not trying to scare anybody. One of these pictures I can't stand, so I'm not going to leave it up there very long. The answer is, it depends. If you are prepared for something, the answer is likely yes. But if you get surprised or shocked, or a word is used that makes you angry, it's easy to lose control of our emotions. And then we lose control of our mental capacity and go, freak out in public Reddit page. That's how. You got to kind of be prepared. And if something does surprise you, take a breath. Give it at least a chance to resonate. Right? That's my reaction. God, I hate spiders. Some people don't like snakes. You see these things and your emotion, fear, comes up. Some people don't like heights. I'm not a huge fan, but I wouldn't stand there for very long. A lot of people don't like heights, right? Kind of talking about phobias, this irrational fear of arachnophobia, right? Spiders, that's me. I said repetition tends to embed things. That's one of the ways we can remember it. And so I use this, advertising. Does it work? Does repetition work? There was a commercial a few years ago in Chattanooga, and I think it was in Georgia because other people have gotten it right. It was about this ambulance chasing lawyer, Charles Pittman. Is the way to go, call 877-9800. One, I'd never call him, but two, it's stuck in my brain because it was repetitive and sing-songy, kind of like the ABC song. So look at this. What companies are we talking about? There's a phone number. Those commercials are incredibly annoying. 877 cash now. I'm guessing you're probably getting all these right. I'm not going to answer them. The point of it is just to see how quickly your brain goes, dang, that's stuck in my memory. That's why they do it. That one, some folks get. K Jewelers. Right? Every kiss begins with K. Did you get them? I bet you got most of them, right? KFC, Walmart, J.D. Wentworth. I'm loving it. McDonald's. They're great as Frosted Flakes, right? Tony the Tiger. And Just Do It's Nike. All right, a few more just to kind of wrap us up, getting toward the 45-minute mark. And these are kind of fun, but some more System 1 mental autopilot illustrating questions. How many birthdays does the average man have? And people's brains go to, well, what's the average lifespan? 72. One birthday, the day you were born. Now you celebrate the anniversary of it. Yeah, I get that. But the point is really read it deeper. And what happens in the class is as we go through this list, people start getting them more and more correct because their brain is shifting into System 2, into critical thinking. They're going, he's screwing with me. There's more to it than this. And they'll actually think about it and get them right. Why can't a man living in the USA be buried in Canada? Start thinking of international rules. It's because he's alive. A man living in the USA. Some of these are, the kind of the trick question idea. Is it legal for a man in California to marry his widow's sister? What? No, because if a man is dead, his wife would be the widow, right? So he's dead. If the wife's dead and the husband's alive, he's a widower. Again, semantics, but 2 coins in my pocket, total 55 cents. One's not a nickel. What are the 2 coins? This is where I get some ridiculous answers. 26 and 28 cent, whatever. Math's not my strong suit. No, 2 coins. One's not a nickel. The other one is. So a 50-cent piece and a nickel are the 2 coins. This one most people get. Farmer has 17 sheep, all but 9 die. How many are left? 9. All but 9 died. 9 are still alive. Okay. So again, just I think it's fun, kind of illustrating this mental autopilot idea. Looky there, just short of 45 minutes. I could yap on. Nah. Class videos 8 and 9. Video 8, I think I'll put in there a couple visual illusions. Again, just for fun. We see things that aren't there sometimes. And the priming video, hopefully you watched it. We miss things that are there. And talk about career choices, starting on leadership at that point. I can't tell you what your career should be. You have to find what you're passionate about and really work toward it. But some choices and some ways to maybe help refine where you're going. If you're an undecided student at this point, starting to think about what's out there, what's available. What do I like to do? Okay. And then video 9, more on leadership. And just a reminder, in every week, you're going to see there's a worksheet due midweek-ish because we start at the beginning of the week and you've got until typically Tuesday, Wednesday to get the worksheet done and then finish up and take the quiz at the end of the week. So that's kind of how we're going to roll. So 2 more to go in step 2. At the end of that, we'll be into step 3 and pressing on toward the halfway point of this class. Hard to believe, yeah? Okay. That's it. Beautiful. Let me make sure. Yes, sir. All right. I will see you all next video.